Russian President Vladimir Putin believed he had everything under control in February 2022. He launched what he called a special military operation in Ukraine, an invasion he thought would be over in just a few days. Ukraine would collapse, Europe would stay quiet, and within 5 days, Putin would gain new territory to fuel his expansionist ambitions. That didn't happen. More than 3 years later, Russia still hasn't taken Ukraine. In fact, things are going from bad to worse for Putin. Most recently, Finland's president publicly humiliated him, calling out his strategic failures in both Ukraine and Europe. On May 28th, Finland's President Alexander Stubb sat down for an interview and addressed the ongoing war in Ukraine. The first point he made? The devastating human cost of Putin's failed tactics. When asked about recent comments from Donald Trump claiming Putin had lost his mind, Stubb didn't dismiss them. In fact, they sparked a serious discussion. Trump's comments came after a brutal wave of Russian drone strikes between May 23rd and May 25th, during which 355 drones and 9 missiles were launched in a single night. 13 Ukrainian civilians died. Dozens more were injured. And once again, it seemed Putin's words about peace had no connection to reality. Trump's reaction was blunt. He said something had changed in Putin, something that made him far more dangerous and unstable. He accused Putin of needlessly killing innocent people. When asked if he agreed, Stubb pointed to the death toll. He said that Putin's strategy is one of delay, a long, grinding war of attrition that's costing thousands of lives every week. While Stubb may have misstated the figure, referencing 5,000 deaths per day instead of per week, the underlying message was clear. Putin's approach has created a war of mass suffering. Just look at the numbers. On May 28th, Ukraine reported that Russia lost 1,050 soldiers in a single day, along with 18 artillery systems, 4 tanks, and 2 armored vehicles. The next day, the numbers were nearly identical, plus more than 80 drones and an additional armored vehicle. These staggering losses highlight the scale of the disaster Putin has created. From the outside, Putin's war strategy looks reckless, even insane. His only move seems to be overwhelming Ukraine with endless waves of troops, what many have called a human meat grinder. The casualties are piling up fast. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, Russia has lost over 986,000 soldiers, killed, injured, or captured since the invasion began. At the current rate, that number will hit 1 million in just a couple of weeks. If this isn't madness, what is? Stubb's message is simple. Putin has become so obsessed with capturing Ukraine that he's blind to the long-term damage he's inflicting on Russia itself. Instead of reassessing his failed invasion, Putin doubled down. He created a war machine fueled by blood, and he still seems to have no plan other than sending more troops to die. But this strategy is backfiring in ways Putin never anticipated. One example, the growing bond between Europe and the United States. Stubb revealed that he's been in regular contact with Trump. They even played golf together and sat side by side at Pope Francis's funeral. These interactions wouldn't be possible without a shift caused by Putin's actions. Stubb's message to Putin is unmistakable. Everything Russia has done has only brought Finland and the West closer together. That's a major strategic failure. Putin views Finland as a threat, but every step he takes only drives the country deeper into the arms of NATO and its allies. Why is Finland so important? Geography. With a border of over 830 miles, Finland shares the longest land border with Russia of any European country. And since joining NATO in 2023, that border has become even more significant. Now Putin is pouring military resources into Russia's side of the border. Finland's military leadership has noticed. Major General Sami Niemi has said that Russia is changing structures and preparing infrastructure close to Finnish territory. Once the war in Ukraine ends, Niemi warns, Russia is likely to return those troops from Ukraine and reassign them near Finland. Though Niemi doesn't believe Russia poses an immediate military threat, the buildup is real. Finland is watching closely. In response, it has completed the first 22 miles of a 124-mile-long border fence. The reason? Russia's hybrid warfare efforts, including directing unregistered migrants across the border. These fences are more than symbolic. They're part of Finland's strategic defense. Equipped with sensors and cameras, they can detect movement and help prevent unauthorized crossings. If war breaks out, the fences could also function as early warning systems. When asked about the border situation, Stubb remained calm but firm. He noted that Russia has long had bases near Finland's border. The current buildup, he said, is part of a normal pattern that accelerated after the war in Ukraine began. 4 Russian brigades were relocated from the Leningrad region when the war started. More buildup is expected. Why is Putin so focused on Finland? Stubb explained that despite Finland's relatively small standing army, just 24,000 active personnel and about 54,000 in paramilitary forces, it has one of the largest reserve armies in Europe. Military service is mandatory for Finnish men, giving the country an 870,000 strong reserve force. If mobilized, Finland could pose a real threat to Russia's already exhausted army. So no, Finland isn't strong enough to defeat Russia on its own, but it's strong enough to inflict serious damage and hold the line until its allies arrive. That's what worries Putin. And that's where Putin made yet another strategic blunder. He underestimated the strength and unity of the countries he hoped to dominate next. His invasion of Ukraine forced nations like Finland to draw closer to NATO, something that might never have happened otherwise. Finland's history with Russia is complicated. In World War II, the Soviet Union invaded Finland, pushing it into a temporary alliance with Nazi Germany. After the war, Finland lost 10% of its territory and paid massive reparations. A 1948 agreement tied Finland to the Soviet Union and limited its ability to align with the West. That agreement ended with the collapse of the USSR, but Finland still chose neutrality for a time. As recently as 2020, only 20% of Finns supported joining NATO, but that changed overnight when Putin invaded Ukraine. Today, more than 80% of Finns back NATO membership. That shift shows just how badly Putin misjudged the consequences of his war. Even Trump has pointed out that Ukraine's desire to join NATO may have triggered Putin's invasion. While that's only part of the story, Putin also denies Ukraine's right to exist. NATO expansion clearly played a role. Stubbs summed it up clearly. If Putin hadn't attacked Ukraine, Finland likely wouldn't have joined NATO. Finland and Ukraine have different histories, yes, but both were once under Soviet influence, both share borders with Russia, and both are now determined never to be ruled from Moscow again. And this leads to perhaps Putin's most significant mistake. He underestimated his enemies and overestimated himself. Stubbs called it one of the greatest strategic and tactical failures in modern military history. Putin thought Ukraine would fall quickly. He thought his army was unstoppable. He thought the West would stay divided. He was wrong on every count. Since the invasion, the EU alone has provided $158 billion in financial, military, and humanitarian support to Ukraine. Add in the contributions from the US, the UK, and others, and the number climbs even higher. Putin thought he would divide Europe. Instead, he unified it. Finland joined NATO. Sweden followed. Neutrality is no longer an option. Putin tried to pull Ukraine into Russia's orbit. Instead, Ukraine became more European than ever before. He tried to split the EU. It's more united than ever. He tried to fracture NATO. He brought in two powerful new members. Everything he did only strengthened the alliance against him. Putin hoped to use Ukraine as a launchpad to threaten the Baltic states, Poland, and Central Europe. Now, he's bogged down in a war he can't win, bleeding soldiers and resources by the day. On May 20th, the EU passed its 17th package of sanctions against Russia, and 18th is already in the works. The West is no longer afraid of crossing Putin's red lines. On May 27th, Germany, the UK, the US, and France lifted restrictions on how Ukraine can use long-range missiles, making it clear that deterrence is no longer the strategy. Containment or even defeat is. Putin imagined a new Soviet-style empire. What he got instead was a continent united against him and a Russian army that's been exposed as far weaker than anyone imagined. And now, if Putin still dreams of expanding into Europe, he'll have to go through a NATO that's stronger, more prepared, and more unified than ever before. This is BAWLER. Thanks for watching.